Today's episode is on parenting. And I'm Brandon. I'm 29, single, making this podcast as a message to my future kids. Joining me today are a couple of people who cannot stop giggling. Camera brings that out sometimes in people. I work at a solar company. I sell solar panels right now. I work from home. And I've been at City Light Church for the last 3 years, and I love it. And I've gotten really involved over the last year and a half. Just finished leading a small group this last season, going through a really cool course called Foundations right now, and learning a ton of wisdom. And this whole podcast, this episode, everything here is meant to be a gift someday to my kids when they're old enough to be able to hear a little bit about what their dad was like when he was 29. And that's the whole inspiration for this. And also as kind of like a video journal type thing of talking about some important things that I've learned over the last year, some topics that are near and dear to my heart, and things that I want to continue to grow in as I get older.
Hi, I'm Scarlet. I'm 21. I'm 21 years old, and I have been going to City Light for pretty much a year this month, and I grew up Christian, but been walking with the Lord for like a year. It's crazy, huh? And yeah, I work, go to school, doing social work. One day the goal is to be a therapist. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Sorry.
Go for it.
Yes, that is awesome. It is awesome, yes. And also, just to note, it is awesome what Brandon's just doing too. Thank you for lowering my mic. I am Allison. I am 25 years old, and I have been attending City Light for, since January, so 7 months now. Let's see. Is this too high?
It's good.
Okay.
I think I'm good.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Yes. So City Light since January of this year, and I guess long story short is that I was not raised a Christian. I identify as a Messianic Jew, mainly just follower of Christ, but I very much value my Jewish history and heritage, and there's something that's extremely important to my family and me. But I have been following Christ since 2017, 2018, and my faith is something that's extremely important to me. So, yeah.
Cool.
And I'm currently studying to become a counselor.
It's awesome. Both of you have interesting dynamics with your families, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation with each of you. Scarlett, I know your mom pretty well. She's been to
She's
all of
cool.
our small groups. Your mom's super cool.
I know, she's actually pretty cool.
And I have met your dad before, and he's awesome. And met him twice. He was at church a few weeks ago, and also one time when we hung out
Sorry, I
at your
didn't
place.
know this.
When you were there.
He came to church. Your dad.
Oh, no, your dad.
Oh.
Your dad. No.
I'm like, I haven't even
No.
met your dad.
No. So your dad.
Oh, yeah.
And then Allison, I know that you have a unique background too with your family and your biological parents versus your current parents. And I'm hoping that this conversation changes, or I'm hoping that it takes a direction of talking about the stuff that our parents did right. And I'll give a little bit of context for this. A week ago, after the last episode, I did bring up my father in it, and I mentioned the first time that I ever was hurt as a kid, and the first time I received a wound when I was a little boy. And the wound was something that my dad caused from being impatient. And afterwards, my dad ended up seeing the episode, and he's going to see this one too. And he's going to call me after he sees this one posted. He called me and he said, don't you have anything nice to say about parents? And I said, well, listen, my goal in making this is a gift to my kids. And I want it to be as real as possible. And I want to be as honorable as possible in front of God. That I'm not putting any spin on this. This is not for anyone. I'm not here to make anybody happy or upset. This is to be as real as I can in front of God for my family someday. That's it. And my dad heard that and he was like, I get that, but we did some good stuff too as parents. And I was like, you guys did some great stuff. And he said, yeah, I think it'd be cool if you talked a little bit about that. And he gave me the idea of, what? My parents did go above and beyond to try really hard to give me and my 2 brothers and 2 sisters a very unique upbringing. So I thought, what? That's cool. And I'd love to talk about that with a couple of people who also seem to have pretty unique upbringings or relationships with their parents and kind of just reflect and chat about it. So my parents are together, growing up together. My parents worked really hard to kind of raise us as very sheltered kids. Looking back, my parents had really good reasons for the way that they exposed us to content really slowly. And I'll get into that in a minute, but my parents' style was a very sheltered approach, and parts of it was difficult. I really wished I fit in more, but other parts of it, I really liked not being exposed to some of the gnarly stuff in life until I was a lot older. So,
I have a comment to make on that.
Go for it.
That's the one thing I'm grateful for in a sense of being a prodigal at one point is you can relate to the world. You can be like, oh my gosh, I know what that is. I always wanted that. Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh my gosh, this, and that. And I'm like, yeah, I did that. And I did that. And I'm not there anymore, but I can say it from the perspective of just I don't know. But I think God has a purpose for every single person. And I think that he took me from being raised Christian by affiliation and not living like a Christian and then being a prodigal and diving into the world to the extent that I could, because I was still I still had really strict parents. I was just rebelling against them because they were so strict. But the stuff that God did allow me to do, now I can use it to relate to people. And I think he uses that because he wants you to minister to a certain population of people. And that's just what he's done for me.
When you say prodigal, you mean prodigal, the prodigal son, you came back?
Mm-hmm. No, I
That's
came
cool.
back.
Yeah.
I tell people I felt like Paul when I got when he got kicked off his donkey, kicked off his high horse like that. Yeah.
That's cool.
I don't know if I told you my testimony.
I know parts of it.
Oh.
I don't know if I know the full story.
Yeah.
Hey. In a weird way, I feel kind of in between. When it comes to both of you guys. My parents, how do I say it? It's they didn't really shelter in terms of not allowing us I was allowed to watch SpongeBob and Rugrats and all that. They definitely monitored what we watched. That's something that's definitely important. I mean, being able to monitor what our children are viewing is just as future parents. I think that's something that I guess what I'm trying to say is that my parents would definitely want to monitor what we were watching, but it's not they had a limit or especially not coming from a Christian household. That's not something that they would say oh, you can't watch this, you can't watch that. In regards to Sorry, I'm actually very nervous, and I did not realize that until until I was put on the spot.
I think you're doing great.
Yeah.
Oh no, I didn't realize how nervous I actually am right now. So
I think you're doing amazing.
Going blank.
That's okay. We can come back to you. I already know exactly what I want to say next.
Cool. Please do that.
Sure. Well, so my hope is to. So I'm just going to launch into it. I'm going to say what I had prepared here. So I just finished reading a book again, Wild at Heart. I've quoted this book a trillion times over the last year.
Brennan Manning?
Yeah, it is. So I just finished reading it again and going through it. The author, who actually went to college with his son, and so this guy's dad wrote Wild at Heart, and it's a super famous book. It's lots of people know about it, but one of the parts of the book talks about how when you become a Christian, when you give your life over to Christ and you start following your spirit, your flesh will always resist. And so there's always going to be two sides of you. There's a civil war on the inside. There's always going to be your flesh versus your spirit. Amen. And so obviously as Christians, we live to not sin anymore. Our flesh will always be trying to drag us back towards that. and we are for sure fallen, broken people, and we are saved by the blood of Christ, but we still have that flesh in us that we have to die. We have to die to ourselves every day to be able to take up our crosses and follow Christ. But we're not perfect. Nobody is.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start living in a repetitive cycle of just giving into your flesh all the time, then you start to put on a persona of what the book refers to as being a poser, being a faker. Like you might say that, yeah, I'm trying to live my life different, but you're not. You might have had that inspiration at one point, but you've just given back into your flesh and you just do whatever feels easy and natural, and you're not trying as hard as you once were. And so the book refers to those people as posers.
I don't know if I would say try, because like even if you're living according to the Spirit, you're not really trying. You're just submitting, and you're being led by God, because He's the one leading you. It's just a matter of having that heart of submission. Because if we tried, that means we're doing it out of our own efforts and our own works, and that's not what being a Christian is. It's to have a submissive heart to the Holy Spirit.
True. What I mean by try is by trying, like putting in effort and fighting your flesh.
Okay.
People just stop trying and they just give in, and they're just like, you know what? Sure, I'm going to do this thing that I shouldn't do, and I don't care anymore. And that's the book refers to people that are in that lifestyle as posers. And so this is the quote from the book: "The world is not a place or a set of behaviors. It is any system built by our collective sin, all our false selves coming together to reward and destroy each other. Take all those posers out there, put them together in an office or a club or a church, and what you get is what the scriptures mean by the world. The world is a carnival of counterfeits, counterfeit battles, counterfeit adventures, counterfeit beauties." And so it describes what happens when people are kind of just stuck in this cycle, and what happens when a bunch of those people come together and live that way. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think that my dad and both my parents, but especially my dad, worked really hard to fight to keep the world out of our home for as long as they could growing up. And one of the ways that they used to do this, so my dad used to be a movie producer. And so he's a super computer nerd. If you ever meet him, he looked like a computer nerd. And he was an Apple developer for years. And my whole family grew up on Mac computers ever since I was a kid. And whenever we would get new movies at the home, he would take the movie, go into his office, go into his huge computer setup, and then he would go in and edit it. And he had the software to do this, and he would go and he would take out, inappropriate scenes for kids or profanity. He'd edit out the words and he'd like silence them, or he'd do whatever. And he would clean up movies for us. And so we still got to watch all the mainstream movies that a lot of my friends were watching. And he would just make sure it was clean before we watch it. So I never got exposed to profanity until like my first year in public school, which wasn't until 7th grade. And I never knew what cursing was. I never knew what a curse word was until 6th grade. And I didn't even know what sex was until, public school. But for years, my parents worked so hard to keep us as innocent as possible and to not put us in the position of thinking and processing stuff before we needed to. And as a result, I think that I had a very different development from all my friends who found out about that stuff in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade from their older siblings, or from their friends having found out about it and then telling them all about it at school. Whatever the way that like people learned about, all the stuff that I was sheltered from, I didn't get that until I got to public school. And I really respect my parents for trying so hard. My dad put hours into every movie. And I remember he would always come home, he'd have a movie with him, and he'd be like, "Oh, Dad, what movie did you get?" Because we'd always have like family movie Friday nights. And he would be like, "Oh,
the fact that you guys even did that, though, your parents prioritized it, like you guys valuing family and the family unit. That's not common. In the world, it's not common.
Yeah, totally. They put a lot of effort into that, and they made sure that we knew that we felt valued in the family sense. But he'd bring home a movie, he'd spend all afternoon editing it, and then we'd be excited by dinner time, we'd be ready to go, and we'd watch a movie together. But him going out of his way and spending hours working on that, and I knew he was working on it for me, and I knew he was working on it for my siblings. And when I was younger, I didn't totally understand why. Now as a grown up, looking back, like he poured a ton of time into that. We had a huge collection of movies.
Yeah, it sounds like he just really cared about protecting your guys' hearts and wanting to just, like you said, shelter, but more so just like protect his babies from just like the world, and knowing like as long as I can just protect them for as long as I can, like this is how I can do it, by editing these videos and just taking these scenes out, and I can like um they can still watch these videos and partake in like quote unquote worldly videos, but I can take out the scenes that aren't so appropriate for my children. And for him to spend hours like that, I think that's just showing the amount of love that um, he just has for you guys. I know Pastor Jabin has once mentioned that love can be measured by distance traveled. And I know that he's not traveling in this instance, but I was reminded by the amount of time that he spent editing these recordings. Like, that must have just taken so much time. And that's not just for not a one-time thing. He did that for every single movie. And I'm just wondering, like, is that something that you would do with your own children? And to what extent? Like, what would that look like for you?
I wonder if he still has a hard
Second
drive.
question.
Oh, go for it.
Is your dad's love language acts of service? Because I feel like with a lot of dads, that's
I don't
their
know.
love language.
It's totally possible. I don't know. I don't think I've ever talked to my dad about it.
It's a conversation to have in the future, but I know with my dad, it's very much, and I think men, they just want to feel like your hero, and they want to feel like I'm providing for you, I'm doing this for you. And because I remember I was listening to Jackie Hill Perry and Preston Perry in 30 Minutes with the Perrys, plug, and they were talking about how pretty much how a man kind of works in the dynamic of a relationship. And it feels like your father, in the sense of him doing that, it's acts of service. In the sense of my dad cared about buying us groceries, making sure we were safe, protecting us as girls, making us feel safe. Like, I don't, one of the things I learned, and I didn't learn this until I went into social work, I never felt unsafe in the presence of a man as a child. And
that's a big deal.
I understand that's a very big privilege, because a lot of young girls get sexually abused when they're below 10 years old. And I was hearing about this stuff, and it was very much a shock, because I'm like, I didn't realize how much of a blessing it was for me to always have that hand of protection from my dad over me, to not be in our family in a sense where I was in an uncomfortable space. Like, my parents prioritized my safety, and it's kind of like that acts of service, but it just is in a different form. But it sounds similar to what your dad did for you guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, if your dad went above and beyond to create that safety net for you and your family, that's, I mean, just the hours of him editing and, whatever commitment your dad spent making sure you felt protected. I think that it's not even as much it needed to be 4 hours and then I felt loved. It was like, I didn't even see the number of the time. It was simply the example that he set of sacrificing his time to make us feel protected. And that's so interesting that, our dads would have different ways of sacrificing our time for different results, but the same goal of making us feel loved.
Yeah, and like to add on that, since it's like talking about fathers and like protection, I would say that my father has also had that level of what just like that's something that my father would also do, have that level of wanting to protect his kids, not so much in terms of like sheltering from like the worldly things, but more so making sure that we're always just more so well taken care of. And just the way that I put it is, my dad has been a mother and father in one at times.
That's a lot.
And it's like, you mentioned biological parents, and he is my biological dad. My biological mom is no longer in my life, but I have my stepmom, who God has blessed me with, and she came into my life at 6 years old. And it's during the time that, like, I guess, during the time that my dad was divorcing my biological mom, and then my stepmom hadn't yet entered my life. That's like my dad had really stepped into the mother father role at once, and it's just like it's a way that I feel like I almost don't have words. It's that the protector type thing.
Yeah.
In a way that just like he makes me feel safe. Like many dads, or at least that I didn't know at the time, like don't take much time to comb their daughter's hair and learn how to French braid in the midst of doing a lot of working shifts at like night after night at the hospital, and then come home, drive to school. So it's just like sacrificing time. Which just leads to like quality time being a huge value.
Well, it's commitment. I mean, if anything, we're talking about how our dads led by example. And so if my dad's example was spending hours and hours in his office working for our protection, and yours was working to provide and protect, and yours was working to give you that support that you needed as a kid. If you needed French braided hair, I mean,
that's so precious.
I'm hearing a very, very clear common theme of sacrifice, especially sacrifice of time and quality time. I think that, I mean, that's the biggest takeaway we've had so far here, is that when I get older and I become a dad and I've got little Brandons running around, or Brandonitas, I don't know yet. But boys or girls, I don't know. But when they, when they're around and they're at that age where they're you know, doing stuff, then I will be seeking ways that I can sacrifice time to. I don't even know if I want to use the word sacrifice. I want to find ways that I can be committing time to them.
I love that perspective. That's just investing.
It is. It's investing. They're like my little investments, my little 401ks running around.
Yeah.
And in any way that I can find time to give into that and make it grow, it's like love is the growth factor that'll make like the stock go up, and then like grow that account, and then give it that much more potential.
And finding new ways to express to them that you love them. Because repetition, there's no intimacy. And intimacy in the fact that, like, I feel like there can be intimacy in every type of relationship that you have. Even as a father, between a daughter, like, showing your daughter different ways. Because truthfully, and I had this conversation with Monet. I love you, Monet, if you're watching. The relationship you have with your dad is how you're going to view men. Period. If you have father hurts, you need to take care of those father hurts before you get married, because you're going to be attracted to the destructive habits that you saw in your dad, and you correlate them with love, and then you put that on a husband. And you tend to receive and be okay with receiving that from a husband because your parents or your dad treated you like that, and our brains as children, there's that hope, and you're like, no, but he loves me. And I had that theme in a past relationship. I'm like, he treats me like this, but my dad treats me like this, so he loves me, and it wasn't healthy. So I think it's to be a good father is to bless your generations, because you're showing your daughter what a man looks like. A man will take the time to show you how to be loved. A man will commit time to you just because he loves you. And if she has that from a dad, she will, along with like you talking to her, but she will expect that and have that minimal expectation and standard of what a husband should do. She's like, because like my dad did this, therefore you should do this. And it doesn't have to be like picture perfect, but just to set a good example. So
I love that. And while you were talking, I was remembering another thing that I actually briefly mentioned in my first episode of this podcast, talking about wisdom candy. And my dad used to always have a stash, and he always called it his stash. And it'd always be somewhere in his office, sometimes in a locked drawer. We'd have to find a key first. But he'd always have like a drawer full of like red licorice and M&Ms and just like whatever else, like a gold mine in there. Because growing up, my mom wouldn't let us ever have artificial dyes, artificial flavors, preservatives, basically anything chemical related in food. And it always had to be organic. My mom went above and beyond making sure that we ate healthy whenever we could. We didn't always have money when I was a kid, but whenever we could, she would make sure we were eating healthy. And so we never got to have candy, like ever. And if we did, it was always like the super organic, low sugar stuff. And that stuff's only so much fun as a kid. But I love my mom for doing that for us anyways. She really wanted us to have healthy development physically. And all the same, my dad created this, like, this gold mine that was always in his office that we knew would be there. And every now and then, whenever he'd come back from the store, he'd hide in one secret bag and he'd go and replenish it. And my siblings would go and find it. And of all the stuff that was in there, I always wanted to be the bigger brother and let them go first and pick out of it. And the stuff that was always untouched was black licorice. And so I'm the only person of my siblings that likes black licorice because I learned to like it because no one else ever would go for it. And so if I ever go for a road trip these days, I'll always get like some black licorice or like Good and Plenty or like all sorts licorice, and I'll just like snack on it in the car as I go. It's not like my favorite candy. It's now a tradition. Exactly. It's my wisdom candy. And so like I don't ever like, it's not like my favorite. Like it's not my go-to. But I would hope not. Just in terms of like memory's sake.
Not you judging him for like black licorice.
No. I mean
like numbing cream.
You know what? It kind of does a little bit. You're not wrong.
It does.
Okay, this is not a black licorice slander podcast. So I used to always go for the black licorice because of that. But it's not about the black licorice. It's about the fact that my dad knew that we weren't allowed to have candy, but he still felt for us and wanted us to at least be able to be a little crazy.
Like, consent to this?
Well, she always knew about it. And she my mom wasn't dumb. She would see us leaving my dad's office with like handfuls of M&Ms and whatever, and she would be like, Gord, and then he would quickly slam the door closed, and then she'd walk into his office and he'd be like, he's just like working on his computer, ignoring everything happening around him, and she'd be like, did you give the kids candy? And he'd be like, honey, I'm working. And they would have like some little exchange, like pretending like nothing happened, and she'd walk away, and then he'd give us like a little wink, and we'd be like, yeah, we got away, and then we'd like run away and go to our rooms and enjoy the candy. Funny. But that was something that my parents did also, and it seemed like they were against each other in it, but I mean, my mom knew that my dad would sneak in candy all the time, and my dad knew that my mom was super intense about us eating healthy, but it was like a teamwork effort.
You know what my dad did? Whenever we'd go to... So sorry. But whenever we would go to birthday parties, like, I think every kid did this. Like, you would, like, smash the piñata, and then all the candy would fall. And then I'd, like, I'd be so quick to, like, grab one of, like, the scoopers. And I'd, like, we coming home with, like, my little, like, I'm, like, this tall. The thing of candy is, like, this tall. And it's, like, half my size. I'm like, I'm gonna eat this week. And then I think my dad just knew that kids don't have very long-term memory. He'd throw it away. He would literally throw it away.
No way.
Yeah, he would like behind my back because he didn't want me to eat it. So like I would be like, oh, I'd go home and then it'd be like within the next few days it would just disappear, like the whole scoop of candy. And I remember,
he didn't eat it?
Nah, bro, he threw it away because I guess he was doing it. Kind of hurt, but I guess he like was just doing it to be like, I don't want her to like, because I already like ate a lot of candy and all this stuff because of my mom. But he was like, no, and he would secretly throw it away, and then I wouldn't realize it until like a few weeks after. And I'd be like, where's my candy? And I'd tell my sister, I'm like, sister, where's my candy? And it was in the trash. So, but I look back now and I'm like, homie didn't want me to die. He protected me.
I wonder if that happened to me as a kid.
Really?
Because I remember always hiding my Halloween stash afterwards.
You were able to celebrate Halloween?
We were totally. Well, so we did trunk or treat, which was something my church put on.
My parents were so quick to be like, that's the devil.
Oh, no.
And they were like, no.
No, same here. My parents didn't want us celebrating and like going and
yeah, we would be at church on Halloween.
So we would too. So my old church used to do trunk or treat where they'd have I used to go to a huge church in California when I was a kid before we moved to Canada. Cool. And then in Canada they did this too, but they would have all the parents of the kids fill up their trunks and then fill up and down and have like little exhibits, almost like going to each trunk, like games in it or like different like scenes or like lights in each one, and then they have candy in each trunk too. And so you'd visit all the families that were part of the church, and then you'd get some candy from each one, and then so we would do it that way. Okay. And they'd have like a bounce house at the end of it, and they'd have like lights and
it is demonic though. Well, not a conversation for today though. But I will
conversation for another time. I'm not
letting my kids celebrate Halloween. But I will tell them.
But no, my Halloween candy for sure. I would always hide it when I got back because I was worried about people taking it. I wonder if it was taken once when I was a kid. I just never knew. Probably was. That's so funny.
Mine for sure was.
But no, my parents went above and beyond to still find ways for us to be able to enjoy stuff like that. Like trunk or treat, like the work that went into that. And my parents would participate every year. We had a huge SUV, and they'd open up the back of it, and they'd line it all with like different animals in there, and we dress up as
That's very
dinosaurs.
sweet.
And I remember I was Barney one year, and we'd go around to the other cars and get candy, and that candy would have to last us for the rest of the year because my mom wouldn't let us get candy except for on Halloween.
Wow.
Or Harvest is what they would call it too. They'd celebrate Harvest.
Yeah.
That's like,
Oof.
that's so much work.
I want to talk
and
about
effort.
Halloween.
Just like
Talk about it.
so much, like the investment portion.
Yeah,
that
oh,
you're
totally.
putting.
Yeah, bro.
They both put, like, both your dad and your mom put a lot of effort and investment and time into making sure that you could, like, enjoy and participate in all the festivities, but, like, in a healthy manner that would make you into the man that you are today. That's honorable. That's awesome.
There's another thing I wanted to mention that my mom did for me growing up. My
Can I
mom.
say this? You're tall
Okay.
because you didn't really eat sugar.
That's possible.
Yeah, honestly though, because you
What?
have like optimal bone development and like growth as a child and as an adolescent when you have like proper when you're like meeting your nutrition levels. No, I'm being dead serious. Serious.
I'm so short because I had so much sugar.
I had rotten
5 foot.
teeth, so anyways, no, I really did watch a podcast, and there was this guy, and he was like 14 years old, and he like broke his hip, and it's because he had a nutrition deficiency because when he grew up, all he did was eat like McDonald's and fast food. So does it? Who knows?
Honestly, I believe it. My mom went above and beyond. My mom still goes above and beyond. She'll still come and visit every now and then and look at what's in my pantry. And if she sees something that she knows is not supposed to be there, she's like, listen, why do you have artificial food colors and artificial flavoring in this and
Honestly,
preservatives
kind of
and sucralose
She's
and,
not wrong.
and aspartame? And I can list all the bad things that are in foods. I can read a food label and I understand that because my mom has spent so much time teaching us about it. What I was going to say is about trust from my mom. When I was a kid, my mom always had this message to us. If you ever have anything you need to know, anything you have questions about, anything you want help with, you can always come to me. It doesn't matter what it is. Any topic, I won't judge you for it. I will love you for it. And I will give you as best wisdom as I can. And so when I was a kid, I tested this a few times to see how like legit it was. And I remember okay, this is going to be slightly inappropriate, but I still want to talk about this once my kids are old enough.
You like sex?
And
what is it?
So if this is going to make you squeamish, then you can pause the episode right here. Okay, so slightly, well, it's kind of like silly and inappropriate, but this is honest. This is part of my life and my story as a kid. I didn't know what the male sex organ was called when I was in 3rd grade. And
penis.
Thank you for helping everyone understand what it is. But
it's anatomy. Anatomy is not inappropriate.
Just be able to say it.
Well, so I didn't know, and so I asked my mom.
Okay.
When I was in 3rd grade, because she had said, if you ever need to know anything, ask. And so I asked her, and she told me. And then after that, I just trusted her with anything and everything. And so all growing up, whenever I had girl problems in school, or if I had friend problems in school, I would go find my mom and be like, hey, Mom, I like this girl, but here's the problem. And then she would always make me feel loved and valued and safe in whatever I was sharing with her. Wow. She wouldn't make me feel dumb for any of it.
That's beautiful.
And she would say, hey, so based on what you told me, she'd always say, guard your heart above all else, guard your heart, for from it flows well springs of life. And she would say, do you feel like you're protecting your heart in this? And then she would help me with some Bible verses. She'd pray with me and she'd say, then now you know what to do. And so she always provided that sense of trust that I could talk to her about anything. And so when it finally became relevant in like 7th grade in Canada, when we knew we were going to have sex ed in school, I told my mom about it and she said, okay, we're going to have the talk. And so one night we went and got ice cream.
You had the talk?
My mom had the talk with me.
Nope.
Nah, I had Google.
My mom gave me the talk. We went and got a pint of lemon sorbet and a pint of raspberry sorbet. at a Vaughn's parking lot. I don't think it was Vaughn's in Canada, but we got it from just a parking lot, and we just went and sat in the car at night at like 9 p.m. on a school night. I was so stoked about being allowed to stay up late, and she turned on the air. It was in the middle of winter, and she said, "All right, ask away. You can ask whatever you want, and I will answer your questions until we're done, and then we'll go home."
That's amazing.
And I sat in the front seat with her, and I started like shaking, like, "Are you sure? Like, I have some questions," and I never was thinking I was going to ask these questions at all to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, "Ask away." And so I started asking, and I didn't understand how most of it worked before that conversation. And my mom was just really mature about it, and she just answered every question. And by the end of 3 hours, we talked for 3 hours. We didn't get back to midnight.
I mean, I don't blame you. It's a very deep topic that just like, it's very important to talk about it, because if she wouldn't have spoken to you about it, a friend would have spoken to you about it.
Exactly. And eventually my friends all were talking about it, but my friends weren't talking about it maturely.
No.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about it very disrespectfully and immorally.
Because we're not taught to see women as people that are worth respect and dignity. That's just not pushed. They're seen as body and objects, and that's how they're treated. And that's how they receive treatment, because that's how they're told to be treated.
But my mom taught me the respectful way. And but I wouldn't have been able to ask her those questions if I didn't have that trust already established from years before. So taking from that, I 110% plan on doing that with my kids. And I plan on telling them once they're old enough, hey, doesn't matter what it is. There's no awkward question. There's no uncomfortable question. There's no question I'm going to judge you for. I love you to see beyond whatever mistakes you think you've made and whatever direction you think you're headed. You're always going to be able to come and talk to me about whatever it is. And I'm going to see you through love first. And I'm going to commit to that. And then the bigger part, though, is I'm going to have to demonstrate it. And
yes.
Me as a kid, I gave my parents chances to demonstrate it, and they did. And my mom did a great job demonstrating that I could talk to her about stuff, uncomfortable stuff like that. My dad wasn't always as comfortable as my mom was, but at least my mom was there as a support system for it. My dad stepped up in other ways, but I want to for sure be that for my kids.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, I did not. I very much want to have I think the reason why I said like it's a vagina and it's a penis, because I think as a child you're supposed to understand what your body is. It's like, this is an arm and this is a leg.
Yeah,
it's a part of your body. And I remember it was a book from Julie Slattery, and she said, if you secular people from the world, from the outside perspective looking at Christianity, they would think that the entire body was created by God, and then the devil like slapped on your genitals. Because like no one wants to talk about it, and they're like, oh, but don't talk about that, and oh my gosh, don't talk. And I'm like, sis, you got 5 kids. How did that happen? And you don't want to talk about it with your kids, and you want to shelter your kids, but the sheltering can be such a beautiful and scary thing. Because it's just like you're sheltering them, but now they don't know anything. And so they'll believe anything once they start to rebel. I really want to prioritize teaching my kids, and I want to make it very clear to them. However I need to, and however the Holy Spirit will lead me to talk to them about these things, will be like, I'll tell them the Bible, and then I'll tell them what actually happens in the world and what is a repercussion of sin. Because the thing with the devil, he doesn't show you the whole picture of what feeding into your flesh and feeding into your sin is. He just shows you the pretty side. And then here's the rest of the repercussions of those actions, and doesn't mention it at all. And I want to tell my kids, like, hey, this is what the Bible says. This is what I recommend doing, because I will share my kids my testimony. And then I'll tell them, because the field that we're going to work in, you see the product of sin. And I'm like, this is a product of that. I don't want you to do that. And please know my heart that I'm showing you this because I want you to understand and see both sides of the coin, not just my parent is sheltering me.
Yes, you guys both said that like beautifully, and I love you've given me this analogy before, but the fact that as Christians or believers, the coin, and that's like taking a quarter, and we get both sides of heads and tails. And I was actually mentioning this to a friend yesterday. Sometimes, like when you like flick a coin and it like spins. Sometimes I was just thinking, like, what if it were to just go like this and just like kind of stand up like that, and it allows us to see both sides of the world. How you were kind of
What is it?
explaining to me before.
1 John 4. For you know the spirit of evil and you know the spirit of good. It's along the words of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so what both of you guys just said, it's like beautifully explained, and that's something I definitely want to bring to my future kids too. I think it's important to just be open, vulnerable, and honest, and that's also what goes with the power of our testimonies, being able to share that. I mean, obviously, with it depends. You want to make sure that you share your testimony.
Don't traumatize them with your testimony.
Yes, know your audience, know who to share your testimony with, and to what extent. So obviously, I mean, as kids, you'll know what to share and when, and with the power of the Holy Spirit. That's what's amazing. He's our helper.
True.
And yeah, that's awesome. I think it's just a really cool thing to be able to share, and I love that your mom did that.
That's so
like,
cool. That's like
amazing.
That's so honorable. That's honorable.
I was actually doing a research paper for my counseling course yesterday that ended for summer term, and it was saying for kids in the foster system who were grieving like the loss of a mother. That's what my research topic was on, and they said that one of the most important things is to have someone to talk to, just someone. It doesn't have to be like a mother figure, but just someone that can ask like the open-ended questions or just to go to. And the fact that your mom did that for you, like that's just important for like that's something that I want to be able to provide for my future kids.
100%.
To have that support system. So.
Yep. No, totally agree. And we're going to lead by example. So as we are vulnerable, kids will learn to be vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And as we process our emotions and express our emotions in a healthy way,
within your marriage,
our kids will. Of course, absolutely. Our kids will see all that from our marriage, from even just from us individually living in our examples. And like there are other ways that I want to set my example. Like I want to stay working out, and I want to stay reading my Bible in front of my kids. I want them to see that, and I want to demonstrate like, hey, we get to go to church today, not we have to go to church today. I want to be really clear about some really distinct ways that I live my life that I want them to model too someday. So all of that kind of ties in together. We got to leave for foundations, so I think we're about to wrap this up. Thank you both for coming on here. This is awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to say to your kids if they end up seeing this someday?
What?
Thank you.
Oh,
okay, go.
Yes. Yeah. Just wait. You said like on behalf. Sorry. What?
Anything you want to say if this is seen again in 20 years by somebody that you helped make?
I guess I would just say like to future kids who see this, just know that you're loved, valued, known, and chosen. And to Brendan's future kids, you have an amazing father that just loves you already before you've already been formed in the womb. So yeah, you have an awesome dad.
I'm saying this because it's prophetic. I think I'm gonna have 2 boys, and that's it.
Wow.
So.
Wow.
Yeah. One of them's gonna be named Micah. The other one, I don't have his name yet. Maybe my husband will decide. But yeah. If I even have 2 boys that are watching this, that's all that needs to be said, because God is faithful and God is good. And I didn't grow up with boys, but somehow I'm going to be able to raise 2 boys by the grace of God. And yeah, praise God.
Thank you both. Thank you very much. To Allison and Scarlett's kids someday. You guys got some pretty cool moms. And thank you everyone for watching.
Bye.
Bye.